Welcome students to another in our ability test preparation series. Today we continue to look at questions to help in your examination preparations. Before we get into the questions though, we want to remind you of a few things. Remember to use the information given in the question so that you can correctly interpret what it's asking you to do. Again, examine all options given to determine the most suitable answer. And this answer must be chosen based on the evidence provided in the question. Always analyze and interpret the information that is given. Now, the ability test that you will be doing will be testing your skills in quantitative and verbal reasoning. Now, some of the things that you will come across include use of patterns, comparing quantities, estimations, and analyzing data. For verbal reasoning, you may be asked to complete a text, read to ensure that you're understanding a passage that is given, and of course, make logical deductions. So, let's get into our first question. Our first question is a passage on growing vegetables. Let us read that passage that is given. Tomatoes and peppers can be planted year-long once sufficient moisture is available. And then we're told what is the best method for planting these vegetables. That is by transplanting the seedlings. We're also told the conditions that are needed. They are indicated here. Tomatoes need lots of sun, rich, loose soil, and lots of water. The roots, not the leaves, must be watered. And we're also told that tomato plants grow very tall, so they must be tied to a pole. The question that is asked, which statement gives the best conditions for growing tomatoes? So, to answer this question, it's important to look at the passage again. We're looking for the best conditions. Is it that they should be transplanted? Is that a condition? No, that doesn't sound like a condition. We're also told that they grow very tall and need to be tied. Well, that information is in the passage, but is that a condition? Not at all. And so, if we look at the passage again, we'd realize that tomatoes need lots of sun and water. Now, that is a condition. Let's look at another question using the same passage. Now, in this question, we're told that a farmer uses a sprinkler system that sprays water high into the air to water his tomatoes. And we're asked, which statement likely explains why the farmer should stop this practice? So again, we would need to look at our passage to see what information is provided that would help us to answer this question. Look at what is asked. A sprinkler system will spray the water in the air. Now, from the passage, should this be done when you're using tomato plants? What statement would help us to answer this question? Let's look at the answers given. Tomatoes need rich, loose soil. Is that a suitable statement for that particular scenario? No. Tomatoes need to be tied to a pole. Would that affect him using that sprinkler system? Not at all. Let's look at the options B and C. Only the leaves must be watered and only the roots must be watered. Again, if we look at our passage, we will find out that in the passage, that answer is given. We are told that only the roots must be watered. And so that is our answer. Let's try another question. We're given a seesaw and we're asked to find which statement is supported by the diagram. Now, do you remember playing on a seesaw? What can you remember about that particular experience? What happens if somebody who is much heavier than you sits on one end of that seesaw? Do you remember what happened then? Yes, the seesaw, that person's on that end, the seesaw would go down to the very bottom, right? It would go to the very end of that device, right? Okay, what happens if somebody who is much lighter than you comes on the seesaw, like a child? Ah, that person may be suspended in the air. So, based on that information, let us look a bit closer at this diagram. So, from the seesaw, from that diagram, what can we, what information can we pick out? Well, Joe and Mary, they're on the seesaw. Now, based on what you shared about your own experience with a seesaw, who do you think is the heaviest? Well, since Mary's side is much lower, it's possible that Mary is heavier. Let's look at another question. We're given a label for Shaq's macaroni and cheese pie. And we're told that on this label, the container has a serving of three servings for each container. We're also given some information about the amount of calories and the amount of fat. So, Merrick ate 3 servings of the macaroni and cheese pie. What percentage of the daily value for total fat did he eat? Before we do that question, let's go back to the label. So Merrick ate 3 servings, but on the label, the amount per serving is given. So if we use 1 serving, the total fat in terms of percentage daily value is 16%. So from 1 serving, Merrick would get 16%. But how many servings did Merrick take? He took 3 servings. And therefore, what percentage of the daily value for total fat did he eat? Can you work that out? Let's see the answer. Exactly, 48. Because remember, the information given is the amount per serving. Let's look at another question using the same food label. Now we're also asked how many calories did Merrick consume? From the label given, again, the number of calories per serving would be 240. Can you see that on the label? Right, 240. And from the first question, we remember that Merrick ate how many servings again? 3 servings. So therefore, how many calories did Merrick consume? How will we find that answer? Yes, we need to multiply the 240 by 3. Let's check our answer. Yes, your answer should be 720 calories. I hope you're enjoying yourself doing this session. Let's look at another question. Now, we're told that a student is measuring the time it takes for water to pass through different soil samples. And from the diagram, if we look carefully, the student is pouring water on the soil sample. The water is passing through, going into the measuring cylinder. And from that, the volume of water used or that passed through can be determined. Now we're given a table with different results. And if you notice from the table, we are given 3 soil samples: clay, loam, and sand. We're also given information on the volume of water added, the volume of water collected in the cylinder. So that would represent what? Passed through, right? Through the filter into the cylinder. And we're also given the time that the water took to pass through the funnel. So let's see what question we're asked about this experiment. So again, we're always expected to look closely at the data, analyze the results, and from that we could determine which soil held the most water, for instance. Can you find out that information? Or how quickly did it pass through the different soils? Do you see that? Right. So all of that information is provided in the table. So let us see what we're asked to do for this particular question. So again, looking at the table, we're asked, water takes longer to pass through which soil? Look at the table. Look at the time it takes for the water to pass through. Which soil did the water pass through, take the longest time to pass through? So for clay, that was 5, loam was 2, and sand was 1. So the answer is definitely the clay soil. We want to look at one more question using this information. Now we're asked which soil has the least, notice that word in bold, the least water holding capacity of the soil samples. So again, let us look at our results. Now if we add 30 centimeters cube of water to each soil sample, so it's the same volume of water that is added, the water that passed through, right, the water that was collected in the cylinder, 24 centimeters cube was collected for the clay, 27 was collected for the loam, and 29 for the sand. Now, what information can we get from that? What do we mean by water holding capacity? Remind me. Oh, how much water it retains. So if I added 30 centimeters cube to the clay and 24 centimeters cube passed through, how much water did it retain? 6, correct. And so for loam, how much water did it retain? We do a simple subtraction. 30 minus 27, that is 3. What about sand? How much water did the sand retain? I added 30 and 29 centimeters cube passed through the filter. That meant only 1 centimeter cube was retained in the sandy soil. So, which soil had the least water holding capacity? Let's see your answer. Definitely sand, because it held only 1 centimeters cube. Great, you're doing great. Great job, students. Good luck on your examinations.